Hey everybody, welcome to the OMG Tarot podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that people ask me about somewhat regularly. It's the topic of how do different major arcana cards show up as actual situations in our lives. During season 1, when I was doing a lot of deep dives into major arcana cards, I tried to bring this up every now and then, this idea of, let's say we pulled the Magician. What would a real-life magician moment look like? Maybe an easier card to think through that would be the Tower, because I think we have a very clear idea of a Tower moment. A Tower moment is getting fired from a job. It's literally a hurricane destroying your home. It's your spouse telling you that they want a divorce. But let's bring it back to the Magician. What would a real-life magician moment be? We know the Magician has immense potential. We see that in the lemniscate that's hovering over his head. And we also can look at his table and see he's got all 4 suits right there available for him. So he's got the tools to tap into that potential, but he's also very early in the deck, so he might not have a whole lot of experience with these tools right yet. A magician moment could be your first day on the job that you just got certified for. So you have your clinicals under your belt, you have your degree in hand, and now you're finally ready to be unleashed on the public. Or perhaps the magician could be new parenthood. A lot of times you hear people say things like, I wish there was an instruction manual for new parenthood, or they don't send you home with instructions. And if you're feeling like you're unequipped to begin this journey and take care of your child, the magician might show up to say, you're actually equipped just fine. Don't overthink it. So I think sharing examples of real-life situations that can be exemplified by major arcana cards can help you get to know the cards better and think through them in terms of what kind of situation is this? Now, of course, any situation can be represented through a variety of cards because that largely has to do with the circumstances surrounding it. So, while new parenthood could be a magician moment, it could also be an empress moment. It could also be a fool moment. It could also be a star moment. The card that you pull for a specific situation more so communicates what is the situation for you in your life, given the circumstances that it's showing up with. So the way that I'm going to guide you through this first set of cards, because this is actually going to be a 3-part series, because I'm not fitting all 22 major cards in one podcast episode, but anyway, the way that I want to kind of guide you through this and show you examples of situations that could show up as major cards, just keep in mind that I'm doing this for more illustrative purposes, that you might have very different experiences with these particular moments and which cards they show up as. So don't interpret it as an exhaustive list. This is more examples of ways that cards have shown up in my experience as a reader and scenarios that they may show up as for you. And I'm going to walk you through why different cards are going to show up as different experiences too. So just know that in a way, we're kind of working backwards here. But I do think that as a reader, this can help you identify what cards are saying when they show up under certain circumstances. So, all right, without further ado, let's dive in. First, we're kicking it off with the Fool. You might have heard me compare the Fool to someone who just graduated high school. And really, that's exactly what this is. These are the moments in your life where you're diving into the unknown and leaving behind everything you were familiar with previously. So let's throw out some real-life examples. The Fool is, quite obviously, graduating from high school. Think about the joy of your graduation day. You're out there on the field, walking with all your classmates, you throw your hat up in the air, and now you're done. You're ready to be an adult. And if you don't feel ready, well, too bad, because that's where you are. It's not meant to be scary, it's meant to be exhilarating. But then again, most exciting things do have a little element of intimidation to them. I mean, maybe that's part of what makes them so exhilarating. But let's take a look at a few other examples of Fool moments in your life. It could be moving to a new country. After all, you might have done plenty of research, but if you don't know what it's actually like to live there day to day, you're about to get a crash course in precisely that, in being a resident of your new country. Investing all of your life savings into really any sort of investment, maybe into starting a business or investing in a piece of real estate, that could be a fool moment. Although it's not always a fool moment. I think if you're making a smart investment, it might actually be more of a magician moment, or depending on where we are in this major arcana, perhaps even a hermit, but that's for down the line. Just know that it's more of that sense of going all in. So when the fool shows up, is it just telling you that you're at one of these junctures in your life, or is it telling you that you need to get to one of these junctures in your life? In other words, might the fool be saying, hey, you need to go and live in a different country? Or, okay, you're here. You're now living in a different country. Could be either. Just know that put in literal terms, the fool is a leap of faith. So things like graduating and launching into the adult world, leaving your home country behind and seeing where you land, putting all of your assets, your faith, your hope, your fears, everything into a new endeavor that you have zero experience with. Those are fool moments. Next up, we've got the magician. As I mentioned earlier, the magician can be a moment where you're qualified to be in the spot you're in, but you're not yet experienced enough to know exactly what to do there. That the magician speaks to your potential to succeed, but also your need to try things and test things out, and even maybe fail a few times in order to learn what works and what doesn't. So the magician can be very literally that, a scenario where maybe you're at a new job or in some new graduate program or something where, yes, you are qualified to be there, but you're going to need to use all the tools at your disposal and see which ones work for you. The magician could be launching your startup or launching any business. Think about that potential and that lemnis gate over his head. Maybe the magician will show up in a reading saying, yes, please, launch your business now. Stop letting it be a fantasy and make it the thing that you do. I could also see it show up to describe a leadership role. Maybe you're in charge of people for the first time. The magician might be saying, use the resources you have because you can go far in this role, but you gotta use those resources. Going from this a bit, think about other scenarios where you're being set up to succeed. The magician might be about you as a graduate student working with an advisor who's going to do everything in their power to help you be successful. In any case, the magician is a scenario where the possibility is there for you, but you need to seize it. You need to make that magic. Or, in less esoteric terms, you need to take what's available to you and rise to the opportunity. Then there's the High Priestess. Her gaze is fixed right upon you, the reader, and to me it's always looked like she's inviting you to pull back that curtain that hangs behind her and take a look at what's operating in the background. In terms of literal scenarios, she is those moments that you're being asked to look inside and examine yourself spiritually. I also think that this should be a topic for maybe a video or a later podcast episode. But think about the differences and similarities between the High Priestess and the Moon. There are actually quite a lot. Both of these cards talk a lot about your intuition and looking inward and really examining who you are on that internal spiritual self. But I don't want to waste a whole bunch of time talking about the Moon card. Go back and listen to that episode if you haven't, and stay tuned for an episode that examines the Moon versus the High Priestess. Because the High Priestess is inviting you to get in touch with that spiritual side. She's you signing up for your first tarot class. She's you deciding to take a look at your natal chart or choosing to attend your first ritual. These are those moments in your life where you say, yes, I do want to explore beyond the mundane. And I think to just throw out a quick difference in the literal applications of the Moon versus the High Priestess, I think those nights that you gaze up at the sky and ponder just the scale of the universe, That's more moon stuff. The High Priestess, I think she's a little more zipped in and a little more close to home. She's a lot more heeding the call, versus the moon is maybe a little more like an observer. So, some High Priestess moments are things like the day you decided to practice more mindfulness, or the catalyst that drove you to tap into your intuition more or explore that side of yourself a bit more deeply. She could be a religious pilgrimage. She might show up to say, hey, it's time for you to visit the Vatican or visit Mecca or visit anywhere that has spiritual significance to you. I think another literal application of the High Priestess could be her telling you that the things you've been noticing are not just coincidences. I think she could be the one who appears and assures you that you're not crazy. Your experiences are worth taking seriously and exploring further. After the High Priestess, we meet the Empress. And unlike the High Priestess, who it can be a little challenging to find some literal real life applications for her, I've always found it very easy to drop the Empress onto real life scenarios. That's because she's the mother archetype, so if she shows up in a reading, pay attention. And she might be literally saying, call your mom. When she's not saying call your mom, she might be speaking to you in your role as a maternal figure. So if you are a mom, she's saying, hey, this is about your relationship with your children. If you're not, she could be speaking to your maternal relationship to something that you treat like your baby, like your small business or your art, whatever it is that you dump all of yourself into. I recently did a reading for a guy who had the Empress show up to symbolize his relationship to the small business that he runs. So when the Empress shows up, this could be a scenario where you need to connect either as the mom or to your own mom. That's a big key theme here. Example scenarios include stepping up as a caretaker, being handed a workplace project and tasked with nurturing it and ensuring that it grows up and succeeds well, planting, gardening, and reconnecting with your ancestral roots and those who raised you and nurtured you, going back through the generations. The Empress could show up to say, I think you should do some genealogy work. After the Empress comes the Emperor. She's mom, he's dad. So literally, if you pull the Emperor, he could say, talk to your dad, give your father a call. Similarly, he could be showing up to speak to your role as a father. So connect with your kids, be a dad, show up. And just like the Empress, we could take the Emperor more figuratively too. He could show up as take the lead on projects at work. He has a very authoritative air to him. While both the Empress and the Emperor are parental in the sense that they raise and guide who or whatever it is they're tasked with caring for, they go about it a little bit differently. The Empress is often seen as nurturing and creative and very grounded and rooted in what she's doing. Notice all the wheat on her card. She's associated with fertility. She parents by providing. The Emperor, in contrast, parents by guiding. He's very forceful, directed energy, and put into something literal, this card could show up to tell you that you need to focus your energy and you need to really lock in on what your current goal is and stop at nothing to achieve it. Sometimes I think that the Empress is the parent who raises you by making sure that you're fed and clothed and taken care of in that sense, while the Emperor is the one who ensures that you can stand on your own feet once you're independent of him. A specific scenario where the Emperor might show up would be asserting yourself to your boss. Push back, don't take crap. It could also be taking on that mentor role. Maybe this card is showing up to say others are looking toward you to understand what they need to do next. In a lot of ways, it can almost be read as the inverse of the Six of Wands, which I'm not going to go down that tangent right now, but keep that in the back of your mind. How is the Emperor similar to the Six of Wands, and how do they kind of act as a before and after or a cause and effect for each other? Because there are a lot of links between these two, let's put it that way. The Emperor is a scenario where you need to use your voice. So Speak it loudly. When your partner absolutely needs to hear your opinion, that's an emperor moment. When you're dealing with a scenario of baton passing, either it being passed to you or recognizing when it's time to pass it on to the next in line, those are emperor moments. Being called to serve in public office, I think that's an emperor moment as well. Next up, we've got the Hierophant, who, similar to the Emperor, guides you and ensures that you're well equipped to navigate the world on your own, but unlike the Emperor, is a little more rooted in tradition and the textbook way of doing things. For the Emperor, the ends justify the means. The Hierophant would never. For the Hierophant, having upheld mores and traditions is part of a job done well. If you reach a desired outcome, but you had to bend the rules or take shortcuts, the Hierophant doesn't see that as a success. One real-life Hierophant situation is having to ask for help. The Hierophant can show up to say, "You're in over your head. Find a teacher, or find your mentor. Ask somebody who knows what they're doing and ask them for help." It can also speak to your relationship with the traditions and the institutions that are present in our world. I've seen this card show up as somebody was making some big decisions about breaking with a certain culture that they'd been raised in. I've also seen the Hierophant to show up to symbolize that somebody was going through the process of questioning everything that they had been taught and everything that they had been raised to believe. Now, of course, the Hierophant isn't going to communicate this on his own. On his own, he's just those institutions and those traditions, mores, rules, however you want to put it. But I had the Hierophant paired up with other cards that pushed the reading in that direction. The Hierophant can also show up to say, go back to school, connect with your mentor or your teacher. Similarly to how the Empress and the Emperor can show up to say, connect with your mother or father, the Hierophant could show up to say, connect with a teacher who shaped you and guided you. A very recent literal example I can pull out of the tarot card readings I do for clients is that the Hierophant showed up to say, somebody important from your past is going to make themselves part of your life again. They're going to kind of pop up out of nowhere. And yeah, that somebody isn't just somebody. That somebody is a former boss or mentor, somebody who really helped you get to where you are today and you've lost touch with. So, literal scenarios involving the Hierophant are any scenarios involving rules, regulations, guidelines, guardrails, traditions, expectations even. The last card that we're going to be looking at today is the Lovers. The Lovers is a long-standing relationship. It's one where you've grown together. Some very literal Lovers moments are things like choosing to take your relationship to the next level. Maybe this card symbolizes getting engaged or getting married. It can also be committing yourself in another way, particularly not necessarily committing yourself to another person, but to an idea, a group, a calling, something like that. I know often people interpret the Lovers as being about relationships between people, and frequently it is. But it can also be relationships with other things. So don't pigeonhole this card into only being about people in love or even people in non-romantic relationships like business partners or close friends. This card could symbolize you and your best friend starting a podcast together. It could also be you taking an oath to be a member of a secret society. That's a thing people do somewhat regularly, right? In any case, this card also can speak to giving yourself into the collective and basically signing on to become part of some end result that is greater than the sum of its parts. You partner up with somebody, you're now a unit. Sure, you're two individuals, you go have your individual lives to an extent, but as a couple, that couple is a proper noun unto itself. And I know that's not how everybody's house works, but ideally, if you're committing to someone and you're trying to build a life together, ideally that's kind of the goal. But this is not the OMG Relationship Advice podcast. Another real-life example of the Lovers in action is any situation where you're being asked to compromise. Remember, this card is associated with intellectual, communicative Gemini, and it could symbolize problem solving. So, one where you have to talk it out with your coworkers and problem solve a solution together. Or a situation where the only way you can possibly be successful is by partnering up with somebody else who can complement your skill set. Let's say you're doing a reading about starting a new business, and the lovers comes up. I might interpret that as you probably shouldn't do this on your own. I think you need a business partner. This is too much for you to do solo. And if you think of the cards as a linear story, how one card's lesson preps you for the next card, think back to the Emperor, too. We talked a bit about how he helps you ensure that you can stand on your own 2 feet and advocate for yourself. Those are very important skills to bring into any partnership. I think we can't be successful in the lovers if we haven't already been successful in the Emperor. So that's about it for our discussion today. I hope it was helpful. I know this is kind of reductive in certain ways and doesn't really go too deep into all the nuances of the cards and all of the more abstract ways that you can interpret them. So I want you to always keep in mind that these are more of the surface level. They're not the be-all, end-all, exhaustive interpretations of these cards. I think it can be helpful to think of real-life scenarios that are illustrated in the cards, and that was really my goal here, to just kind of throw you some real-life, day-to-day situations that frequently show up as specific major arcana cards. Now, as I mentioned early on, this is part of a 3-part series, so you just listen to number 1, 0 through 6, and next week we're doing 7 through 14, the Chariot through Temperance. So tune in, subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and if you have opinions about this, I'd love to hear them. Hit me up on Instagram, leave me a comment on Spotify. However you want to do that, let me know. Let me know what you think. Alrighty, talk soon. Bye-bye.